name's Wade Preston, and I am the acting executive director at the North American Blockchain Association. It's probably worth noting how the heck I got here. I got pulled into the crypto policy space years ago from the brick and mortar entrepreneur space. So I still own a very Main Street focused brick and mortar business. I have a coffee company with retail cafe locations, and very locally focused in a lot of ways, but also globally focused, because we would work with farmers, coffee farmers all over the world. And through that's kind of how I got involved in blockchain technology, is just be able to try to fix this like 400-year-old disaster that is the coffee supply chain, to figure out how to get coffee farmers in the developing world better access to what we think of as pretty simple financial tools, but are actually like the lifeblood of our economy that a lot of the world doesn't have access to. Just things like low interest rate loans, capital formation tools, cash flow smoothing, insurance, like a huge one. Insurance is almost annoying. We spend more time complaining about insurance, but it is a huge unlock. If we did not have insurance, we'd be in a really bad spot. So just noticing all of those things in the world, I started building some things in the blockchain space, and then kind of got a little worried that I might get sued for doing that, and started looking deeper into crypto policy, and through a series of unfortunate events, landed myself here. So I was a founding member of the Blockchain Association in my home state, which is the Alabama Blockchain Alliance, and also one of the founding board members for NABA, which is a kind of consortium of state-level blockchain associations. So when we talk about what it means and what the power of associations are in this space, I like to think of it as just that. It's starts at this grassroots, ground level Main Street, and then it's represented by these state associations, and then it moves up all the way to DC and the bigger federal associations like the Blockchain Association. And I'll hand it over to Michael to talk a little bit about the BA.
Yeah, thanks, Wade. My name is Michael Poshpak. I'm a senior manager on the Blockchain Association's team, primarily focused on our industry affairs side, so dealing a lot with our members, all the ecosystem participants, getting them involved in the policy-making process. To give you a little background on myself, I've been in the industry for a little over 3 years at this point. Prior to that, I was doing work on campaigns, grassroots, talking to voters, some public opinion research, and one day decided I wanted to leave that world, wasn't sure where I was going to go. Came into blockchain policy, didn't know anyone in the space, and I like to kind of share that kind of background just because I think as I've gone through the policy world in blockchain, we'll get into some of these themes, but how important education is in informing our advocacy that ultimately sets up what we can do and accomplish in DC and at the state level. It really helped to really kind of start from the beginning at an industry, kind of understand, how was I learning blockchain? What were some of the roadblocks that was getting in the way of my understanding, and how do those lessons help prepare me as I'm explaining what is a blockchain, what is a smart contract, to ultimately to policymakers, regulators at the state, federal level who are going to be deciding the rules. And I think one of the biggest themes that I've gotten out of the past 3 years is regulation really shapes the products that our companies can offer, can imagine to offer, and things along those lines. So we'll be talking about the importance of education and how that ultimately translates to the advocacy that can happen and the possibilities from there. Yeah, so just to kind of start off here, I want to show both of our mission statements from the Blockchain Association and NABA, and won't read the slides, but as you can see here, we're very committed to durable rules, making the connections, giving people opportunities, and I'd like to just mention these mission statements as a way to show that, there is a lot of alignment. There are many organizations, but we're all trying to get to the same spot. That is an ecosystem that can thrive here in the United States, consumers that are protected, things along those lines. And we'll get through it as we go through our presentation, but we also have a really great partnership with the North American Blockchain Association. We view them as our state policy experts, and we'll get into some of the partnerships and some of the programming that we've done between the state and the federal level. But that all to be said is there's really great alignment here, and I think that's really the name of the game when it comes down to really good policy work. It's not only do you know the policy, do you know the tech, but are you making the right connections to maximize what you can offer to your members, what you can offer to the ecosystem more broadly. But Wade, if you anything to add there?
Yeah, and just from the NAWA perspective, I don't want to read mission statements verbatim, but it's connect, amplify, and advance are the three words you'll see in that mission statement, and that's what we do because we're kind of a more bottom-up approach to things. So we're working towards trade associations in all 50 states, and we want to connect them all, share best practices, learn from each other, and learn what works in one space and what might not in another. And yeah, it's worked out really well to move kind of laterally in the way that ideas flow, because when we connect and then we amplify the best ideas, then we can kind of go through some of those ideas that have really been amplified lately and have come through in legislation. Yeah, once they're amplified, we seek to advance them in policy positions and actually see them become laws on the state books, which is a lot of fun. I joke with Michael a lot. Like I work on state policy where we actually pass bills. And it's there's like one or two a year at the federal level, but at the state level we're just moving them through. So it's exciting stuff.
We got genius though. Hopefully we get clarity.
Just one a year. It's good.
Just good. One. Every few years, we get around to it. So kind of setting up the theme for this talk going forward, and kind of mentioned it in the other slide, but I think you can really break down what we do as associations and the importance it is to our members into two words, that being education and advocacy. And so kind of playing off on the education as being the foundational stone for any of these conversations, any of the debates, any of the hearings you might have seen on C-SPAN or wherever you see hearings on digital assets. I think what you come to realize is that didn't just appear. There is a lot of good work that goes on through these organizations to make sure that, when a member of Congress asks a question about, a smart contract, what is a blockchain, what is Bitcoin mining, how is it affecting my district, who is using these products, who's building these products, that really starts at the ground level. So, an organization like NABA, Stand With Crypto, ourselves, the Blockchain Association, we're going into the state capitol buildings, we're going into Capitol Hill, we're going to speak with the SEC, Crypto Task Force, the CFTC, to talk through, really as the relationship starts, what is a blockchain? What are the characteristics? Why is it better than a system that is centralized? What is the benefits of decentralization? You're really trying to get people to a point where they've been comfortable their whole lives, understanding that there must be an intermediary, that it plays an important role, but we're here to explain, no, there's a better way to do these things. There's a better, more efficient way to do these things. With digital identity, there's a better KYC that exists out there. So that all being said is this education really starts at the ground level, and it kind of gets to that first audience, that being the regulators, the policymakers. It's really setting up that base level of knowledge so that you can have the debates, that you can have talks around the Clarity Act and the nuances of token taxonomy and things along those lines. And then kind of rolling to I think the second major audience for an association, that would be our members. So when we think about what can an association do with just its staff, it can do a lot in terms of organizing. There's a knowledge base that comes from the staff. There's connections on Capitol Hill with the regulators. These are all offerings that are provided and services, but really what really helps us up level is the expertise of our members. So we bring our members in to talk through not only the Blockchain 101, but the nuances in the Clarity Act, how stablecoin regulations working in the Genius Act, the implementation pitfalls in Treasury as we talk about how things interface with, not only the states, but internationally. There are a variety of conversations, and I can probably keep going on and what some of the talks and the debates have been. But really, I think that really, in my mind, when we talk about how do we start here, it's that education. And it's not only an education to the members of Congress and the regulators, as I had mentioned, but it's also educating our members, teaching them how do you maximize your effectiveness here in Capitol Hill or at a state capitol? What are the opportunities to engage? So that's kind of, from the member perspective, what they're looking for an association. Not only an organizer, someone who knows the right folks in DC or a state capitol, can pull things together, can make connections across industry, but just informing them, like, how do I engage? How do I leverage my expertise to talk about the products that are making a real positive difference in my community, your constituencies, and kind of going from there to ultimately make sure we're creating rules that allow these products to be developed here, offered to U.S. retail institutions, is ultimately the end goal. But it's kind of how I view the education piece of this.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add to that is, like, it's interesting, the jurisdictional lines, like between federal and state, and then there's 50 different states. So these are all different things, and different aspects of our industry they're governed by different bodies. Some companies are going to be very federal heavy. Like a large stable coin issuer is just going to be a real federally based entity. But someone that's working in blockchain-based property deeds, or decentralized identity, or insurance, or something like that, they're going to need to have a framework that works at the state level, and they're going to have to go to where those things are issued. Like property deeds, vehicle titles, those are issued by your state. Your ID, your driver's license, that's issued by the state. So when we start talking about putting these things on chain and advancing the technology into people's daily lives like that, we have to be aware of the jurisdictional differences. And some of these association members, they have jurisdictional overlap. Large exchanges, they may worry about unclaimed property at the state level, but then worry about the SEC and the CFTC at the federal level. So that's just kind of the way that organizations like BA and NABA, the way that we work together to kind of bridge those gaps.
Yeah, certainly. And kind of to echo Wade, I think, since last October, Blockchain Association and NABA have had a really strong, solid partnership that has really been focused on educating, not only educating our members who are more at the federal level and what's going on at the state level, but also, education on how do our members at the federal level engage with state actors. And vice versa. I know at the state level, we provide some information on what Treasury is doing, especially around stablecoin regulation and implementation. But the next few slides, just wanted to highlight some of the examples of the fruits of this partnership and how we've kind of built from there. So really the initiator of the partnership has been, or not really the initiator, kind of like the second tier of this, we'll kind of be working backwards from here, has been our state policy forum. So this is something we kicked off back in April. This is a meeting of the minds with folks from BA's membership that have an interest in state policy, and then also folks from the NABA world who have the expertise, have the knowledge that provide information, and we make good connections from there. So we started out in April. We did a kickoff call to talk about, what were the aims of the forum. That would be getting our members together to talk about not only the state issues at hand, but how do we better coordinate. So if there's a federal actor trying to do something in the state of Florida, how do we make sure that we are creating those spaces to have people share what they're working on state by state, so that BA and then NABA, who knows the people at the ground, can connect the right folks to ensure that all people are rowing in the same direction. I say we want to be as efficient as possible and make sure that there's nothing that's creating any complications. So that being said, we started off in April. We had our second call in May to talk about 2027 legislative session, just talking about what things to expect next year. And then most recently, we had a really excellent talk from folks from the state of Utah, Chief Policy Officer Bramwell, leading this really fascinating use case called state-endorsed digital identity. It's kind of, when we had first heard about it at the Blockchain Association, and we talked to our privacy folks, we talked about to our digital identity folks, really, it was a really amazing example to have a good walkthrough through for our members, because it was those talking points that we've always said on digital identity that respects the individual, that is liberty forward, constitutional forward. So, out of that conversation, that really good presentation and Q&A with our members, we've been able to make connections from there to ensure that our members want to engage at the state level, that they know exactly who to go to and are properly informed as they are trying to figure out how their tech fit. How does their tech fit into what a state needs, what advocates need, things along those lines. But we'll pass it off to Wade to kind of mention anything else.
Yeah, no, I think that pretty well clears it. We, as you see at the bottom of the slide, just where we're kind of heading from this point forward as we move. Most states have wrapped up their legislative session, so most states don't act like federal government. They kind of they're part-time legislatures that wrap up usually in June, July at the latest. There was a couple of states like those hardworking folks in Pennsylvania that will continue all year round, but most are wrapped up. So we're preparing for next year, pre-filing bills and getting framework set for 2027. And there's a list of the things that are high on our radar right there. So yeah, we can go on to the next slide.
And kind of this, oh yeah, this is the next one. It's similarly laid out, so we're moving forward. Yeah, so kind of to talk about the other really excellent programming we do with NABA, this is kind of the initiator of the partnership. So with the Genius Act being passed about this time last year, it's actually the 1-year anniversary is coming up in a few days. So really exciting first piece of legislation on the national level to regulate stablecoin issuers, determine the regulator, how stablecoins are classified, a lot of good clarity that we've really seen really uptick not only the number of issuers, but the amount of stablecoins that are being generated and the use cases from there. But what we had noticed, really going back to October, and as the bill was starting to be considered for implementation, as folks like Treasury were putting out initial advance notices of proposed rulemaking, there was a need, as we were identifying, to really figure out how BA can be a provider of information. So what we saw in the Genius Act was a provision to allow states to oversee state-level issuers that are issuing under a $10 billion circulation threshold. And so knowing that we had great partners with the North American Blockchain Association, we wanted to formalize a relationship to provide Genius Act roundtables so we could go to various states to talk about that provision in the Genius Act, to bring builders directly to the state treasurers, to the CFOs, to the folks at maybe the security bureaus that are going to be figuring out how do you actually build a state program. And kind of where this fits in is NABA, they have the folks on the ground and they have the state level expertise and how this will function at the state level. On the Blockchain Association side, we are always interfacing with Treasury. So as Treasury was putting together rules for state frameworks and how they're substantially similar, things along those lines, we were providing, real-time information to our NABA partners to help inform these roundtables on, how is Treasury thinking about a state stablecoin framework, and how is that going to impact the members on the NABA side and vice versa. And that being said, we've done a series of these so far. So we've been to North Carolina, Pennsylvania last year. We did work with the local DC government around state stablecoin frameworks, most recently Alabama. I won't steal Wade's thunder because local of Alabama, so I'll let him share that story. But we've really been enjoying the partnership and kind of touching on, the importance of education in that first theme of, you really have to be in the room with these regulators, with these policymakers, explain to our members how do you engage things along those lines, bringing the minds together so that we create policy that's workable, that fits right with the technology and allows it to flourish going forward. But I'll pass that to Wade.
I am very, how many people from Maryland are here right now? I'm very, very sorry to tell you that you are in infamous company with Alabama now. You're one of 4 states that have passed the stablecoin framework, Alabama being another, Georgia and Florida being the other 2. So far there are 4 states that have passed those, and we got to meet with the director of the Alabama Securities Commission with a bunch of different stakeholders and association members in Alabama and walk through that. And it's, I think the stablecoin roundtables and just working through legislation like Genius is exactly why we need to have, good stakeholder involvement all around, from federal to state level, all the way down to that like individual citizen, all the way to these large like pieces of bureaucratic machinery like the Department of Treasury, right? So because you have the upside of these large issuers, right? Your Circles or Tether's new thing and PayPal's and all of that are, they provide like this certain benefit in stable coins at a large level by just buying up lots and lots of T-bills. Like, this is an objectively good thing. It's pushing down our national debt payments. It's about creating buy pressure on those instruments. It's ensuring dollar dominance. Like, this is a very good federal thing. But then we want to be able to still do that. But then at the tertiary level, like for Main Street, we want to be able to have small stablecoin issuers that can, maybe not use T-bills, and maybe they use community bank deposits as a backing asset, and maybe they can create, small microeconomies inside of a state or a city or maybe even a neighborhood, and they can incentivize the kind of economic activity that community needs and wants, and they can use programmable money in a way that does that. So, when it comes to a partnership like BA and NABA's, that's what we're trying to figure out. How can you create a small issuer, maybe a 5-10 million, stable coin that's like narrow scoped to create this economic outcome in a certain community, and yet also that same framework, have the breathing room to oversee, a massive issuer like Circle. So it's got to be a conversation. And I will say this is, as easy it is to get cynical about government, there is a conversation that's being had between these large bureaucratic institutions and actual citizens and companies and builders, and we're able to interface and say, hey, maybe you need to kind of like tier this a little bit. That works for the big guys, but it doesn't work for the little guys. Or, hey, this thing you're doing is like way too in the weeds. A really big issuer is not going to be able to keep up with that. So just being able to work through like different use cases in different jurisdictions and make sure that it all comes together and respond to NPRMs. Some of I've actually been really encouraged by. I think for a long time we got during the Gensler administration, the NPRM would come out and be like, you just like got your boxing gloves on, you're ready to go. And now some of these they're more like, okay, what are the rough edges that we might want to alert them to and sand down and make sure that we're not stepping in something inadvertently. So, that's just, I think Genius Act is a great example of like the need for, coordination, which blockchains are tools for coordination, governments are tools for human coordination, and we have to maximize that. So doing it in partnership like this has been really great.
Certainly. Yeah, so this kind of takes us to our second theme here. So as we had talked about the education component of this, really the need to have that 101 understanding, 102 and beyond kind of understanding for regulators, that kind of really sets the floor on, can you have a conversation centered around advocacy? In my mind, advocacy is taking the opinions from our members, pulling that information together, providing bill feedback, submitting a comment letter to an agency, going to do Capitol Hill education days or advocacy days where we go to the Hill and explain, whether, we look back in Earlier this year, we did something on tax principles. We've done a lot of work on the Clarity Act to do the right education there, but that all really builds off of a fundamental understanding of what is a blockchain and what am I regulating here, what is the impact to my constituents. So it's that ability to translate beyond what is this to how should we deal with this. Am I thinking about this the right way? It's those additional questions that, based on the feedback from our members, how the tech actually works, what fits, what doesn't, we help kind of find consensus positions to determine, especially to provide and lend our voice to regulators and members of Congress as they are developing the rules that are ultimately going to shape these products. So whatever comes into play is going to determine for a member company, am I actually going to provide this product that we have in our back, or we're thinking about launching in 5 years? Can I actually provide this, or do I have to think about this a different way? Do I need to go to another country? So as we're thinking about advocacy, I just pulled some of kind of some key advocacy principle points from Blockchain Association's website. So certainly, we're looking for clear, durable rules. Our members are looking for the clarity, as I had mentioned. No pun intended. I feel like that joke is said every 5 seconds in DC, but I will say it again. They're looking for the clarity to ensure that they are building products that can be provided to U.S. institutions, that they're compliant, that retail can access them, that ultimately they can be here in the U.S. And a lot of our members, they want to be here in the U.S. They view the strength of the U.S. markets, the strength of the U.S. consumers. They want to be here. They want to build here, the talent here. So certainly that they are looking for that clarity because they want to build these products in the U.S. So that also goes maybe to durability too. Like, once you pass a rule that's, fits, it provides the protections, it makes sense for the products. We want these rules to be lasting so that, as technology develops, yes, there's always a conversation, but we want to make sure that some of these things are settled to give the confidence for innovators to move forward, for consumers to participate. Kind of the second point here, I think, broadly, like we see protecting consumers and supporting innovation as going hand in hand. Our members want to do the right thing. They're building great products that people are interacting with. This isn't a trade-off. This is something that goes hand in hand. And then finally, U.S. leadership is critical. So this is a theme that we're particularly focused on, especially in America 250, that need to really push innovation back to U.S. shores. As Wade was alluding to back in the day with the Gary Genslers of the world and previous administration, a lot of our member companies and folks throughout the ecosystem went offshore, and now we're kind of seeing that 180 turn back to the U.S. But part of that is the need for those clear rules, for the durability of those rules. That's what folks are looking for. That's how they're engaging with us. They want to participate. They are incentivized to participate in the right way, and those are kind of the ways that we're thinking about, from those base layers of like advocacy principles. We can go off on different branches on what that looks like, from how do we advocate for self-custody or developer protections and things like that. But this is kind of really, at least from BA's perspective and something we've seen across the board, kind of that base layer advocacy positioning that we go into on most meetings and most feedback documents and comment letters.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to this that's a little different from the state perspective, all of this mirrors, except that at the state level, you have to be aware of the fact that, all states in some ways are a little bit in competition with each other when it comes to economic development. So they want to, one wants to get out in front, one wants to be the trailblazer and do the thing first and do it right. And then sometimes it cuts the other way. One wants to be the most protective, right? And they want to have like the most ironclad rules to the point they'll kind of like get in competition to see who can have the most draconian rules around things. So we have to kind of deal with that dynamic a little bit. It's similar to the U.S. on the world stage, but as Americans, we're very competitive with things, and that happens a lot in the state economic development departments as well.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, and kind of just to dive into some of these advocacy examples, I know I kind of touched on these before, but the kind of the first series here on how we really engage with policymakers and folks on Capitol Hill certainly comes down to our bill feedback and comment letter process. So on the bill feedback side, this is, our opportunity, whether you've heard of the Clarity Act, we had talked about the Genius Act, there's a lot of work on tax policy going on with Ways and Means on the congressional level, on the federal side. But that all being said, that process begins. We'll get build text from Capitol Hill. We'll kind of read it internally. From there, we'll send it out to our members. Our members will provide that expertise that I had mentioned that, as associations across the board, no matter what association you're talking about, really rely on that expertise as they're explaining what their members do in any particular industry. We'll pull that together along with internal research, kind of our perspective, what we've heard from the past, but do some rounds of feedback, ultimately getting to that end product of, what works with this bill, what fits, what doesn't work. Is this bill prescribing an intermediary where no intermediary exists? Things along those lines. Or is this token classification creating complications for people holding or using tokens, things along those lines? These are some of the things we've come across, or especially on anti-money laundering side and things along those lines, figuring out how do you really ultimately position the association's opinion to provide really substantive feedback to members of Congress and their staff. That's what they're looking for, and really that's how you continue building trust within office. The other piece here that we do a lot of is letter writing to the agencies. So with the Genius Act being passed, we've seen a flurry of requests for comments and notices of proposed rulemaking coming from the prudential regulators along with Treasury and other folks. This is kind of a snapshot of what I think we'll see if Clarity goes through, a whole another level of letter writing and things along those lines. But the way I view it is, once Clarity, hopefully once it is passed, and as we've seen with Genius, these were really the guardrails that Congress had put into place. So we've gotten to a point with Genius where we had the debates, we put up the guardrails, this is what issuers are expected to do, this is how they're classified, things along those lines. But from there, the agencies will take it over to do rulemaking, implementing processes, and really continue that conversation of, what is the exact kind of metric here, percentage there, or how does this fit in with other regulations? So there's a whole level of other conversation to make this all fit and provide a whole level of other expertise. And also, if you look at especially Genius, and you'll even see it in Clarity too, there are a lot of provisions that defer a lot to rulemaking. So whether it's comment letters on definitions or other requirements, there is still a whole level of debate, consideration that goes past the initial guardrails that Congress puts up. But yeah, that's kind of really like a really good snapshot of like how we engage with advocacy. I would say certainly through like paper and pen. I guess nowadays email and the internet. But I'll pass it off to Wade if he has anything to add.
Yeah, being from Alabama, I often, I use this analogy that the legislation is just like the barn door, right? It just like lets it out. And then rulemaking are like the individual cattle chutes that like put everything into exactly where it needs to go. And that's sometimes even a more intricate process. And being kind of a very, kind of young and scrappy organization that NABA is, like we were working through, doing the same work of like giving the state's perspective. How is Treasury going to, or OCC or FDIC or any of these regulatory bodies, are they writing rules that make sense for that small issuer in the state that I mentioned that has a very narrow scoped, community specific use case? Are they thinking about that when they're writing these? Because too often they are thinking, and rightly so, about the systemic risk of a hundreds of billions of dollars, trillions of dollar issuer. We approach the comment letter stuff a little bit differently and from a different perspective, but it's the same conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of the other major piece here for the Blockchain Association is certainly not only our comment letters and our bill feedback, which, as I said, pen and paper, email, and the internet. This other portion of advocacy is certainly our Capitol Hill advocacy education days. We really, pride ourselves on being able to bring our members together, bring them to Washington, because ultimately these are the opportunities that I would say are very key for our members. It's a great opportunity to explain their technology, their constituent connections to a member of Congress, things along those lines. But these are basically events that we run at the association that, often center around an issue. So as you can see there, a sampling of some of our education days. We started off with tax priorities back in February. We had done work on DeFi earlier in the year. Most recently, we had done some really great work on national security as it comes to the Clarity Act and how that's shoring things up, providing new tools for law enforcement. We had organized a letter that was signed by over 160 former law enforcement. So really pulling together all those pieces of information to ultimately create an event where we can bring folks to Capitol Hill to explain their positioning as a company, their technology, and really advocating for, why do we need developer protections? Why is the BRCA that is in the Clarity Act, why is that so essential for folks that are trying to build here in the U.S., and et cetera, et cetera. So really kind of viewing these as opportunities and kind of pulling back to my earlier slide of, what is the role of an association? It's not only to provide this education and whatnot, but it's also to inform our members, how do you engage in the process, and helping them to engage in that process, because they have an expertise that, is so valuable to a regulator, to a policymaker. It is, how is my product actually working, and how can you walk me through this? And so we create these venues as the Blockchain Association, as NABA, to make sure that these folks are talking to the right people that are making the rules. So this is kind of, in my mind, how it's a little different than what is a blockchain. You're talking about bringing folks in to talk about, why is this rule going to threaten my product from being offered in the US, or how is it going to make me change how I'm going to put different, features into a product, things along those lines.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can think about this in the way that like cars are manufactured, right? Like it's industry feedback, because the industry knows how an automobile works, and they know how to make an airbag, and what the what a seatbelt should be made out of. And then after time, they start to innovate, and those innovations become standards, and those standards become laws or regulations. And very much the same way, that's what we do in the association path when it comes to crypto. So yeah, well, this is my next. Hold on. Before, I need to ask you.
Okay.
How many federal crypto bills got passed in 2025?
One.
Well, okay. Next slide. So these are just a few of the policy wins that we had at the state level, where we do the real work. All right.
Quite the scoreboard.
Yeah. No, it's I'll be totally honest. I do a lot of work at the federal level too, and at the federal level, it's sexy, right? This is the stuff that's on the news. This is stuff that everybody's like banging gavels about and getting like hot and bothered, right? And it's like a win like Genius and a win like Clarity will be like, those are, that's worth charging up the hill. And I will say that like it makes me proud to be a part of this industry and being an advocate in this industry, because the truth is like, I joke, we got one bill passed last year, but the reality is like, it's the only substantial piece of legislation that got passed, period. Everything else that passed Congress last year was, a continuing resolution or a must pass, like the NDAA or a farm bill or something like that. Like for better or worse, mostly for worse, the U.S. Congress does not pass standalone legislation anymore. So when you can find a standalone bill that passes, that really is a special thing. So all jokes aside, it is a big deal that we passed Genius, but not as big a deal as passing like all of these different ones that we have over the last few years. So we had in 2025, just to kind of rattle through these, we had 3 states that started up strategic Bitcoin reserves. We pushed forward, this is kind of a group of legislation for commercial laws and modernizing, recognizing digital assets that trickles down to unclaimed property and all sorts of things. Also updating Uniform Commercial Code, which is Uniform Commercial Code is basically the thing that allows you to like buy something in one state and carry it over to another state, and there's no big deal. Like you can buy a car in Virginia and then get it titled in Maryland, and that's not a big deal. It's because of Universal Commercial Code. It's just kind of an agreement between all states. So like, this is how we're going to do commerce. It needs to be updated to include digital assets. So we're at over 30 states now that have updated their UCC to include digital assets. And we've seen just blockchain policy infrastructure expand through things like blockchain study commissions that have been spun up in a lot of states, as well as digital bill of rights and blockchain basics bills. They just kind of lay the groundwork for everything else. And as I mentioned earlier, Maryland, shout out again to you guys, are one of 4 states that have passed Genius compliant stablecoin frameworks. This allows state issuers to issue a stablecoin in your state that's regulated by the state government as long as it stays less than $10 billion, which allows for that narrow scoped, like, kind of economic incentivized. Really, what it does is it rehomes a lot of financial infrastructure. States kind of sub out a lot of their financial infrastructure to larger financial hubs like Manhattan or San Francisco, or the payment processing through Atlanta, and that's where all that stuff goes, and it leaves states like Maryland. When you create these stablecoin frameworks, it gives a very clear path to bring that back. So those 2, 3, 4, 5% hits on different things that are leaving the state and going to Manhattan can come back and make that real economic impact. Because we know that when dollars stay closer to home, they're more impactful. So those are big wins. I think we're getting a 5th one in September. I hear that we are in Pennsylvania anyway. So Utah equally is exciting. I think Utah's doing some really cool stuff about SETI that we mentioned earlier, state-endorsed digital identity. It's a sovereign identity. It belongs to you. It is yours. You are you. You should own your identity. It is kind of weird that like identity has always been, like your identity has always been a number in a database somewhere, or a card that the state issues you. Or your identity is a digital footprint that is owned by Meta or X or Google or whatever, right? This is a framework that sets up a sovereign identity, a sovereign digital identity that you own, you control, and that you can share the pertinent information with a counterparty that you need to. So if, for instance, if you want to buy a bottle of wine at the grocery store, the only piece of information the grocery store needs to know is that you are verifiably over 21 years of age. They don't need to know your actual birthday. They don't need to know, your gender. They don't need to know your home address. They don't need to know your eye color. They don't need to know if you're an organ donor. But right now, you have to disclose all of that to them in order to buy that bottle of wine. With a framework like this, you could own your entire identity through ZK proofs. You could say, hey, look, I'm 21. That's verifiable. Can't be changed. This is me, 21. I'm taking my wine. See you later. And you probably have to pay for it still, but maybe not. I don't know. Maybe digital identity will solve that too. Yeah, SETI is a really interesting framework that I think we're going to see proliferate in the next year or two. And then we're also able to kind of play a little bit of defense in states like California with DFAL. CBAC and California is doing a great job at just like keeping DFAL sane, which is California's like structure for digital assets in kind of their state market structure bill. And we've seen this in other states. We're playing a little defense now in Illinois, maybe retroactive defense for a pretty bad tax bill that went through there. We were able to squash some little things like in Kentucky. There was a bill that came out that was going to require all hardware wallet manufacturers to create backdoors. That they would have to restore your seed phrase on demand, which basically means that there's no such thing as your sovereign ownership of your coins on a hardware wallet, because they would always have a backup of your seed phrase. And we were able to get in touch with the sponsor of that bill and just kind of walk through like, hey, we hear you. This is a consumer protection, and there are many hardware wallets that offer backup, but that doesn't need to be a law, and this is why, because that means that you don't actually own this. If someone else always, that's basically saying someone else always has to have a key to your house in case you get locked out, right? Yeah, playing a little defense is also part of what we do, even though it doesn't show up on the scoreboard. Those are still wins. And yeah, I think that as we move towards 2026, I think we're going to start to see a transition with, again, to go back to the partnership here with the federal government, is when we see clarity pass, I think it's going to open up the floodgates for a lot more, not just policy at the state and local level, but actual implementation. Things like SETI, things like stablecoin payments and procurements. Like you look at a state like Wyoming, and they took their payments and procurements from like 60 days in some cases all the way down to 30 seconds. Because they put it on verifiable blockchain rails, and they had great companies like Fireblocks and Hashfire and other companies that have fire in their name, and they're able to execute these in like very compliant and instantly auditable ways, so they can get these payments out very, very quickly. I think we're going to see stuff like that: payments, procurements, digital identity, all of the things. I think we're going to see new and interesting insurance frameworks, record keeping that happens a lot at the state level. Like I said earlier, vehicle titles, deeds, all of these things. I think we're going to see it rapidly move towards the blockchain sphere. As clarity passes, I think that a lot of states are just kind of waiting for the federal government to say, oh yeah, it's good, you can do it. So we're very excited about what the rest of 2026 and moving into 2027 and further brings for not just state policy, but actually like state governments and municipal governments using the technology. Like, I mean, maybe it's one of my favorite use cases is, I think we're going to see an explosion of tokenized municipal bonds in the next 2 to 3 years. There's no reason we shouldn't. I think crypto's proven to be really, really good at bringing liquidity to non-liquid asset classes. So, things like tokenized real estate and all sorts of other places where it's like there's value there. Everybody understands the value, but there's not enough liquidity. And I think municipal bonds are one of those, and I think we'll see that open up pretty soon on the heels of clarity as well.
So yeah, to kind of round things out, kind of harkening back to our first theme, education, and then second being advocacy, I think it's really helpful to kind of encapsulate, as we're parsing out, why an association's voice matters. It's a voice based off of unity. So it provides a lot of perspective on a variety of segments within the ecosystem. Blockchain Association, we represent over 100 companies in the space, ranging from centralized exchanges to decentralized projects and L1, L2, stablecoin issuers, folks throughout the tech stack. That all being said, that members look to associations to be unifying voices, to provide a perspective that really adds power to what can be accomplished, the education that can happen, pulling together resources in an association. These are all great services that translate to ultimately really good policy. So ultimately, as we see and as we've talked through with the examples and the use cases on what interactions with the government looks like, I think as we look at really good policy like the Genius Act and hopefully, once we get clarity and that can go through, that this doesn't happen without this. That, companies do need to show up to explain their products, and an association is just one of those outlets that they can use. It's really a great way to really pull your expertise and to talk through issues with actors who are doing similar things to you and bring that all together to provide really to members of Congress or staff, regulators, folks at the state level, a wider perspective that they can then tap into as they're building rules, as they're trying to learn, how is what I'm writing impacting what you're doing, and how does this impact my constituents and everything in between. So that all being said, and kind of the idea that I want to leave off here is that really an association is just one of those outlets for a company, and it's really a powerful voice built on unity that can really unlock other opportunities beyond a single voice of any one company.
Yeah, I'll leave it there. Anybody questions as we got a few minutes? Well, I think that, one, I think it is interesting when you talk about, we have car manufacturers here in the U.S., right? We know them, Chrysler, Ford, Dodge, right? And they interface with the federal government when it comes to safety and thing is when it comes to digital asset companies and things like that. It's like our markets should be the best in the world, right? They have in every other way, right? So when our market participants here interface with the government through associations and help write good rules of the road, to continue the analogy, right? That those rules are implemented on those foreign actors too. If they're going to do business in the U.S., they're going to play by the rules that we have set, and that we have set in coordination with industry and government, not just government being heavy-handed and deciding something, or industry running rampant. There's been consensus, there's been coordination, and everybody's going to play by the same rules if they're going to do business in America. So I think it's an apt analogy, and thanks for extending that. I mean, I think that's and that would go to your question. Like, I think even if a foreign entity was doing something like coming in and like being an issuer of municipal bonds, they're going to have to play by those same rules that we set. Oh, you're out of my pay grade now, man. I'm not a macroeconomic tariff guy. Does anybody else have? We have just like I think a minute here or two. So yeah, go ahead.
First off, I love what you guys are doing. It's awesome. It's necessary. If you could definitely target some of the states that are anti this, like I'm from Connecticut, the worst.
Oh God, you asked the question, and the first thing that came to my head was like Connecticut, which is crazy because like DCG is there. It's like so many like finance, like yeah.
I mean, if it was up to our legislation in Connecticut, would still be using carriage pigeons.
Yeah.
We're just so behind. We actually passed a law against stable coins. So, but please target that idiot state. And second off, like, if you could talk about people, discussions from all over, all different people, not just in your positions. Do you have forums set up for people? Like, I'll just use an example. A good friend of mine, Greg, who's on the Solana super team for hackathons. Nobody's ever won 3 hackathons, and he has won 4. He's only 20 years old. So I think getting voices from some of these 20-somethings and 30-somethings is very necessary, and some of the people in your position that aren't as open-minded need to put their pride aside and say, we don't know as much as these others. Why aren't we listening to them?
Yeah, so it's a really fair point, and I think first of all, our friend Alan Deckman is doing the Lord's work in Connecticut. He is in the belly of the beast and does excellent work there. But also, like I also, Cards on the Table also do a good bit of work with Stand with Crypto, and I work a lot with the BA and like some federal things. I do a whole lot of work with NABA and stateside, and I also Stand with Crypto is like the grassroots, and Stand with Crypto is actually a really great outlet for those type folks. We actually took a bunch through Stand With Crypto to Capitol Hill last month, and just, yeah, you know, plucky young startups and builders that were like doing really interesting things. I mean, we had one that was like a stop motion animation studio / coffee shop that was financed by like a on-chain project in Portland, Oregon. It was like the kookiest little like thing ever. And they were able to sit in like, you know, Ron Wyden's office and like tell their story. So I think those, to your point, I think those stories absolutely matter. There are some just like gigabrain genius, like 19-year-olds building crazy stuff that we need to get in front of. And I would say Stand With Crypto is like the grassroots. That's a great, and yeah, so I'm happy to connect there. So yeah, well, I think that's about all the time we have. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you.